please tell me a little bit about yourself.
Oh, so my name's Lucy Ryan. I live out in Gloucestershire. My background is originally in the theatre, and then I moved into sales, and then after that, and then I became sales director of a company in London and then in Australia. And then when I came back to this country after Australia, I moved into training and coaching probably about, I don't know, about 18 years ago, something like 20 years ago. And then I was training director of Europe's largest sales training centre in Cheltenham.
Right.
And then 11 years ago I set up my own training and coaching consultancy.
Right. And what's your own background, education or training, positive psychology and coaching?
Well, I've got an MSc in applied positive psychology.
Yeah.
And then in coaching I have various coaching qualifications and NLP qualifications and emotional intelligence and transactional analysis and strengths deployment. So, but with positive psychology it's mainly the MSc that I did for 2 years.
And for how long would you say you've done positive psychology coaching or something like that?
Well, it depends really. I classically, since I was doing my MSc, so whilst I was doing it and afterwards, that's probably about 4 years. Having learnt about positive psychology, I would say I've actually been doing it for about 15 years.
Right.
So I think a lot of people do it instinctively before someone put a label on it.
Right, yeah. And your present job, can you describe some of the things that you do now?
Well, I have a training and coaching consultancy called Mindspring, and I spend 50-50 time running training courses, whether they are sales, management, leadership, and about 50% of my time coaching individuals. And again, that might be sales performance coaching, impact. I do a lot of personal impact coaching, confidence coaching, or what I would call general executive coaching.
Right. And how much is positive psychology part of what you do?
How much is it what?
How much is the part of what you do? Is it like 100% is influenced by positive psychology?
Oh God, no. No, I mean, I don't know how much it's influenced it. I don't call myself a positive psychology coach. I don't know. I couldn't put a percentage figure on it. I mean, it's influenced it in terms of it's given me some more tools and techniques. But I would say that long before I did the MSc, I was taking a strengths approach and all the confidence coaching that I was doing. And I think I've now, because I've been so absorbed in it and studying it and lecturing, because I also lecture at the University of East London, so because I study it and I train other coaches in it and I lecture in it, I think I've just absorbed it into what I do now. Right. So I couldn't put a figure on it, but yeah, it's influenced the way I work.
Yeah.
How much, I don't know.
No. And can you mention again the people that you typically coach? Who would those be?
They'd all be, well, they would mainly be executives within the private sector in the UK.
Right. So and when they come to you, what would they typically present as a challenge or a problem that they would like to work with?
It depends who I'm working with. So, and I also, one of the big strands of work that I train a lot of coaches to coach.
Yeah.
So, so typically, what I'm on the personal impact coaching side. Typically, I am working with people who are either lacking in confidence, either they're new to a role, they're new to a job, or they just need to step up their personal impact, or they've got a big event coming up and they want help with confidence or presentation coaching, so in terms of writing it, delivering it. So that would be one strand of work. Also, if I'm doing sales performance coaching, then that is helping salespeople at every level just improve with what they're doing.
Yeah.
Or I do a lot of work with managers who need to transform their management approach to incorporate a more positive coaching approach.
And do they ask for that, or what do they ask for when they?
Usually they ask specifically for that.
Right.
I do some general executive coaching where people might want help in influencing or in stepping up to the next challenge, which is slightly more general.
Right.
But it's always around some degree of confidence in either making a change, stepping up to a new challenge, transforming the way they work, transforming the results that they have. So it's always around some area of confidence.
Right. Okay. And when you work with them, can you tell me how would you typically approach a new client who wants to work with you?
Well, I don't have one standard approach, except for the fact that I would always talk to them beforehand and find out what it is, what's brought them here, what they want from it, what their expectations are. So that will always be the same.
Before you meet them, or when would you talk about these things?
Either on the phone or face to face, doesn't matter.
Right.
Or sometimes via email. But usually, either it could be phone, email, face to face, or they are clients I've worked with before.
Right.
So that's the only commonality is finding out what it is that they want, how they want to work, the ways they want to work.
Right. And then everything else is different, or from time to time, or?
Yeah, I mean, and then it's different depending on the person that I'm working with.
Right.
So it could go down a psychometrics line. So there could be a form of assessment, but there isn't always a form of assessment. Again, that depends on what the person is facing at the time, and also the person who has booked me to do the work might want a 360-degree feedback done. It literally depends. So depending on the challenge, I will choose whether we do assessment, what techniques we might use, where we might go forwards.
Right. So what types of assessments would you use when you choose to use them?
Well, I have a kind of whole range of a toolkit. So I might use the VIA, the VIA, whatever it's called. I might use SDI, I use most commonly, the Strengths Deployment Inventory.
Yeah.
I might use LPI, the Leadership Practices Inventory. With a lot of my senior executives that I coach, I do phone-based 360s though. So I don't use an actual psychometric. They identify people they would like me to call, and I phone them.
And what happens when you phone them?
We decide what questions we want to ask, what the person wants to find out, what the client wants to find out, and I conduct telephone interviews.
Right.
So I conduct a 360, then I summarise the results and come back to them.
And is that a structured or a semi-structured interview? Or?
Yeah, it's a semi-structured interview.
Semi-structured interview.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so I do that a lot.
And one person asked me that I asked him when I interviewed him, what would you like to know from other coaches that I interview? And he said, oh, it'd be nice to know when they use when they use assessments, so they use this assessment for that, or this technique for this situation. So
that's the question coaches are always asking: is what do I do? Help. Where do I do what?
So when would you use these assessments? Like when would you pick the VIA? For what things would you pick it, or for what people would you?
I couldn't tell you that. That's the kind of thing with coaching, is you can't say, well, I would always use it in this situation, or I would always use that in this situation. If I have someone who is new and who is, we're definitely looking at confidence, I would practically always do some strengths work as an understanding, and that would probably revolve around the cards that I use. And I would, a lot of the time, use the strengths deployment inventory, just so that they understand themselves better and I understand them better.
Right.
So I would use that most commonly. But other than that, there is no, in this situation I do this, and in this situation I do that.
No.
I might do if I've got a senior executive and they need to develop in self-awareness, they've been booked into coaching because they've received feedback about their behaviour, then I will pretty much always do a 360.
Right, yeah.
In that case.
Yeah.
So it depends. I think the broader the toolkit you have, the better you are, really.
Right. And you mentioned you use the cards and the other strengths deployment. Yeah. So how do you use both of them in this?
Well, they work together.
Right.
So one I would use as a general conversation to understand them, get them talking, hear about what's good about them, hear about their strengths. So it's almost used as, I use it often as an icebreaker.
Right.
But the strengths deployment inventory is much more of a psychometric.
Right.
So they work together well.
Right. And so do you do it in the session, or is that before the session? They
always within the session.
Within the session?
Yeah.
Also when they fill out an inventory, is that in the session? Or?
Yes.
So you sit there while they're doing it?
Yeah, with that I do.
Okay. And with others you don't, or?
No. So it depends. So the LPI, the Leadership Practice Inventory, they do that, and that's all done online and then sent to me.
Right.
And obviously the 360, for instance, I conduct by phone.
Yeah.
So again, it depends on session.
Right.
But the strengths deployment inventory, I always do that within the session.
Right.
VIA they might do online themselves and bring as well.
Yeah. And if they bring it into a session, or after they have filled out in a session, what happens after that? How do you talk to them about it, about the results?
Well, that depends on what I'm using. So as any, I guess, normal coach would do, so we discuss the results, we talk about what they think about the results, we talk about what they agree with, what they don't agree with, what they would like to do with it, where it's useful, where it serves them. So we would have a good coaching discussion around it.
Yeah. And you say discussion, so what would you be doing? Would you be asking questions or stating some things, or what?
Yeah, I'd be asking questions.
Questions? Do you use other techniques when you discuss?
Such as?
Stating something, or instead of asking a question, you could tell something, or...
Yeah, well, I mean, I have a whole range of coaching methodologies, if you want such a word. So I will move from directive to non-directive, and at times people want advice or want direct feedback. At times it's all about asking questions. But for instance, what can often happen with a 360 is that you ask a lot of questions about it, and maybe their awareness differs with other people's awareness, so sometimes they might not agree with what someone said.
Yeah.
And there is a role there with giving direct feedback that actually, here's what I've seen.
Yeah.
So I would hope that I have flexibility in what I do in terms of asking or telling, but not, I'm quite comfortable with direct feedback if that's needed, but I would prefer that we're talking and I'm asking and they're talking.
Right, okay. And also I have some questions about positive interventions. So do you use positive interventions, like the traditional ones?
Do you mean traditional from positive psychology?
Yeah.
Such as which ones are you thinking of?
You mentioned the ones earlier from Authentic Happiness. There are some in
what, like gratitude journal,
for instance,
or the Count Your Blessings? Sometimes, not often. I'm not doing life coaching. I think a lot of senior executives, certainly in Britain, don't respond that well to some of the positive psychology exercises, the classic ones. But I do use a lot around strengths. So it's only, the gratitude journal, things like that, I would rarely use.
So what do you use around strengths?
Well, I use cards. So I chain via the psychometric. I don't particularly like very much. I think some of the questions are very skewed, particularly the appreciation of beauty questions and the religious questions I don't like. And I got a very negative response from clients about them.
Right.
Who were wondering, within a business context, why they were being asked to fill out a psychometric that said, I go to church every day, or I go to museums, and it didn't fit. But I do like the strengths very much. And I prefer them, so I did use Gallup StrengthsFinder assessments before.
Right.
And I much prefer the VIA strengths. I find them broader. I find that we can have a better, broader, more general discussion with them. So I wanted to find a way to move away from the psychometric. So I developed the cards, which you've seen, haven't you, I think?
Yeah.
So I developed the cards, and so I just took the 24 positive psychology strengths and changed them into cards.
Yeah. See if they're on. How can you raise them up a little bit like that? Okay. Yeah, then they're right there.
So I changed them into 24 different cards, so that it gave not only a visual aspect to it, but we end up being able to have much broader discussions that are client-led rather than psychometric-led.
Right.
What I find happens with particularly the VIA psychometric is that people end up with a list of 1 to 24.
Yeah.
They always go to the end and go, oh, what am I not good at? And they then often put the list to one side. And or have a problem with the listing or are concerned with the ranking.
Right.
None of which I particularly want to have a discussion around. I'm interested in what they think are their top strengths right at the moment and what that means to them. And how it serves them and how it doesn't serve them. And, when it's overdone, how they could use it differently. So this, and also I work with younger children as well. So I work with 11 to 15-year-olds as well on the resilience work that I do. So this has worked across, the cards have worked across with chief executives and children. And people have liked the reflective nature of being able to spread cards out and reflect on what these might look like and where they have them and where they don't. And the visual nature taps into something that a psychometric doesn't. So it taps into another sense that an online psychometric just misses entirely.
So if you wanted to help me find out my top strengths using the cards, how would we find them?
We'd spread them out on the floor, or wherever we are, and so we'd spread them out, and I would ask you to choose the strengths that most resonate with you.
Right.
And if you struggled with that, as some people do, then I would ask you to ask other people. So I'd ask you to take the pack away, and I'd ask you to ask several other people to choose ones for you.
Right.
And to bring it back to the next session.
Yeah.
And so that they get the reflection from other people. Because the other thing that a psychometric does, as you know, is it's entirely self-report.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to, rather than ask other people to do a psychometric on you, that they can have a really interesting discussion using something visual. So I've known a lot of people that I've coached ending up having a really interesting discussion with their manager, purely because they're taking the cards and saying, I need to actually work on my strengths. What do you think are my strengths?
Yeah.
And so actually the coaching has already gone way beyond me and our session
exactly.
and a list of strengths. It's already become an interesting, useful discussion with the person and their manager.
Yeah.
So that would be the starting point, would be what actually resonates you, how does that serve you, and depending on the discussion that we're there to have, if it's about your personal impact, I might talk about how these strengths work with your personal impact, how they work with you, how they work against you. So for instance, if someone has humility and modesty as one of their top strengths, they will often be much shyer in terms of their ability to go into new situations and be very impactful.
Yeah.
So we might talk about how to use that strength differently and how to work with another card, bring another of their strengths to the fore to link with it.
Yeah.
So you can work with them in lots of dynamic ways. If somebody has a specific problem that they're bringing to the coaching session, we'll often spread the cards out and look at what strengths would help them this week work with that problem. What do they need? Whether it's one of their top strengths or not.
Right.
Just what do they actually need to pull on to start tackling that problem?
And if it's not one of their top strengths?
I don't mind. I'm very interested in working with strengths holistically. I actually think that there is a danger of working with just, your top 5 strengths and that is you in a way.
Yeah.
I actually think we have all 24 of these, just in higher or lower degrees.
Right.
And that sometimes we need to pull on a different strength that we're not particularly good at in order to get through a certain problem or challenge or changing situation.
Yeah.
And I think as we mature, we should be looking to develop as many strengths as we can, however hard we might find it. I think it's useful for development that we learn to have the ability to pull on other strengths. Otherwise we just overdo them.
Yeah. And do you use other strengths tools?
Yes, I use a strengths deployment inventory.
And there are tools associated with it, or?
So again, there's a psychometric associated with it, and a kind of visual assessment.
Right.
So I use that one, but I don't use any of the other. I don't use Gallup now, or Realise 2, or any of those now.
And why do you use these and not Realise 2?
I just like it.
Right.
I think that, I believe that in coaching, the tools you use are merely the catalyst to the discussion. They don't need to be everything. Mm-hmm. They are a catalyst to trying to move forwards in life.
Yeah.
So if we've got a useful catalyst that does that for us, then the assessment's good.
Right.
But I haven't worked with Realise 2 to be able to make a judgment on it. I just haven't worked with it.
And what other, when I asked you the question before, positive psychology interventions, we talked about the traditional ones.
Yeah.
What other positive interventions would you say that you use?
I use quite a lot, but not classically from the book. So I've developed lots of different ways of integrating positive psychology. I don't know, lots of different ways. I have something called a motivation ladder, where I help people understand where they sit in terms of motivation and what would help them move up the ladder. So that's all linked in with self-determination theory and Decky and Ryan's work, but just makes it very understandable.
Right.
So people actually physically walk up a ladder. I use an emotions come energy grid. So rather than an emotional intelligence, I sometimes use an emotional intelligence psychometric, the Mesquite, but mainly I use a grid that I lay out for them, and we discuss emotions and their link with energy and stress. And so in terms of Fredrickson's work of 3 to 1, I link that in a lot with the emotions energy grid. I do quite a lot of work with people in understanding what happiness is, and in terms of balancing pleasure and meaning and engagement and people, and how to balance it. And I use 4 kind of bubbles and help people identify that. What else do I use? I can't think what else I use. I think, so those are probably classic interventions that I might use, but there's probably loads more that I can't remember at the moment.
Right. So just to make sure that I understand it correctly, so you have developed tools based on
the research.
Yeah.
So,
but it's your tools. You have developed them.
Yeah.
Right. And you said something about Barbara Fredrickson.
Yeah.
So how do you use the theories when you build the tools? How do you get from what you've learned to end up with a tool?
Well, if we take, so for instance, what we know from Fredrickson's work or Lesage and Heafy is that there's, for high-performing teams, there's a kind of 6 to 1 ratio.
Yeah.
And for normal flourishing, there's about the 3 to 1 ratio. So, for instance, what I might do with a team is get them to explore those ratios. So I get them to examine language within a team meeting. They might video the team meeting and they might examine the language themselves and see what goes on. And so I get teams to be very self-exploratory and to look at the 6 to 1 ratio that way. With, for instance, the emotions grid, I might get them to look at what percentage of time do they think they're in a real stress zone, and what percentage of time do they feel they're in an energetic zone.
Yeah.
And what triggers them into each of those, and how could they try to reach this 3 to 1 ratio within the optimum zone versus a stress zone. And then we talk about different techniques. So I integrate it that way.
Right. And how do you get your ideas to do it that way?
I don't know. I don't know.
No.
I like creating ideas, and it's just the way I've always been, which is I like taking the academic theory and making it very user-friendly for people. So I like making it physical, I like making it visual, I like making it fun. I just want to make it tangible, so it just doesn't sit up here as some academic theory that's quite interesting but means nothing on a grounded level.
Right. Okay.
Oh yes, I use parrots as well for resilience.
You use what?
Parrots. So with children, when we're talking about resilience, I use different forms of parrots that are the different forms of psychological ways we have of being resilient or not.
And can you give me an example?
Yeah,
so
so
it's not live parrots. It's
no, not live parrots. That would be too noisy or difficult. So, for instance, there is the worrier parrot, the blamer parrot,
right. Okay, yeah.
The judge. So those, giving it a cartoon feel and giving it a name. So people name it, and then they name positive parrots to help them trigger themselves into positive states.
Right. And how do they typically respond to these
tools?
They
love it.
Yeah?
They love it. I mean, children will always respond to something physical and fun, but adults will too. Adults have never wanted to just be bored.
No.
And actually, adults like moving around a grid. They like walking up a ladder. It allows them. They like playing with cards. It allows them to. I found it allows them to reflect in a different way. It taps into a different sense. It taps into a kinesthetic, a visual way of working.
Yeah.
Whereas I think coaching can often just be talking and discussing.
Yeah, exactly.
And it can be very static.
Yeah.
Whereas I've always found that adults respond when they can move and see and visualise and as well as talk.
Right, yeah.
So I endeavour to do that.
Right. When you discuss with clients, when you talk with them, do you share some of your knowledge of positive psychology, models, theories?
Sometimes, yeah.
What could be an example?
Fredrickson's ratios, positive to negative ratios, is a really good example of it, because there's some quite nice research behind it.
So what would you say if...
I would often... I've done a handout on it, so I would often show them the handout and show them what the research has been done, what this means, and how they might want to use it. So that would be one way. For instance, on motivation, I have developed 15 ways that comes from all the science, Decky and Ryan's work, all the self-determination theory work, 15 ways to move up the ladder and 15 ways to demotivate people, and I will show them that and I'll give them that. Right. So I share a lot of the theory. I think it's important in terms of the science, the credibility, to show people the science behind the intervention. I think that's really important.
And you do that when you're together with them in the session?
Yes, very much so.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Other things that you share? Now you mentioned Barbara Fredrickson. What else do you typically share? I
share quite a lot of Seligman's work. I mentioned recently to a couple of clients about Seligman's work on PERMA and flourishing, but I haven't really read enough about it to share it yet. I will share. What else will I share? Strengths. I'll share a lot of the research behind strengths, and what we know about strengths, and what we know about why it's important to take strengths seriously. I think people are quick to write off positive psychology, particularly in this country, as fluffy or silly. So I think the science adds a depth and a credibility to it. Right.
Do you call it positive psychology when you talk?
Sometimes.
Right. What else do you call it?
I call it lots of things. I call it thriving. I call it flourishing. I call it achievement. I call it being at your best. I call it performing. All of those kind of things.
Right.
Sometimes people respond really positively to the notion of positive psychology, and some people are immediately turned off.
Right.
And don't and think suddenly you're going to transform into a psychologist, and
right.
But worse than a psychologist, you're going to turn into a positive psychologist. So I'm quite careful I'll read the situation and decide
how to
verbalise it. But mostly I don't. Mostly we are talking about, in all coaching, we're talking about performing or being more successful or thriving or being happier. So naturally we're talking that language.
Right.
Naturally I find we're talking a language of confidence and of strength. So I don't find a need to then give it the label of positive psychology. Although, funny enough, last week I was coaching someone, a senior director in television, and then at the end of our session, she then said, I'm reading this amazing book called Flourish at the moment. I don't suppose you've ever heard of the field Positive Psychology. And then I felt really, and then I had to go, actually I know quite a lot about it. So sometimes I'm more hesitant than I need to be.
Yeah. But in the session, when you talk to a person like that, do you introduce concepts like, do you introduce the word strengths?
Yes.
So you introduce...
I use the concepts the whole time.
When you talk?
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, if they have not used them, you introduce them?
I talk about strengths, I talk about being at your best all the time. That's what I do as a coach.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have some questions about flexibility. So how much would you say that you change the things that you read about, models, the theories? How much would you say that you change the things? You mentioned before that you have developed a lot of tools to make it more tangible.
Yeah.
So do you do that always, or do you sometimes use exactly the way they were?
Well, I have never seen any really good positive psychology interventions that I could use within business.
No.
Do you, apart from VIA, do you know?
Tools?
Yeah.
Well, most tools are the ones, the traditional ones. Robert Biswas-Diener has written some books on positive psychology coaching with some reflective exercises.
Yeah.
But it's not physical exercises.
No, that's not
it's not visual.
I will use questions and reflective exercises, things like that. So I'll use that. But in terms of what you're talking about, classic positive psychology interventions like the 3 W's or I would rewrite.
Yeah.
So even I might use an appreciation note. So I've done that with people.
What's that?
So that's writing to someone that they're really grateful to. So I wouldn't probably do the gratitude journal, but I might change it to an appreciation or a reflective diary.
Right.
So I've pretty much changed all of it, but staying in line with the science.
How do you know that you stay in line?
Because I think that when you're talking about the gratitude journal, to change that to be an appreciation or note or reflective diary is not straying from the science.
Right.
It's a change in language, really.
Right.
Same with, for instance, the working with the 4 bubbles about what happiness is in terms of pleasure and passion and people and purpose. That's absolutely the science, and Seligman might use his PERMA model or his 3 pillars, and I happen to use 4 bubbles. It's staying within the science. It's just ways that I translate it across.
Right. Okay. Let's see.
I think I also find it easier to make things my own rather than use somebody else's. I think once I have a sense of ownership of it, I find it easier to translate to clients too.
Yeah. And can you say some more about that?
No, just sometimes other people's language doesn't always work with me, particularly if it's American.
Right.
So it's easier sometimes to change some of the language so that it works for me and my clients.
Yeah. Makes sense. And how do you know that it works for the clients? How can you tell?
Well, either they tell me, I mean, all my work is based on recommendation, so I suppose that's the first, you know, they come back, they tell me, they progress, they achieve the goals. That's the most important thing, is they come to achieve something and then they achieve something.
Yeah.
So that's how I know.
So, and what do they typically say?
Well, it depends what they're doing. So, for instance, at its simplest, if someone's come for some coaching because they've got a big event that they're presenting at, well, then I'll get feedback on how it went and how they felt and what went well and all of that, and the raised levels of confidence. So clients are always feeding back in terms of what they used, how useful it was, how they feel about it.
Is that, do you ask them about it, or do they say it themselves?
Either one.
Okay.
Sometimes I had a client last week who spoke for the first 70 minutes about how thrilled she was with everything she had put into place, and had transformed her relationships with her 3 direct reports.
All right.
So she was full of it. I didn't have to say a word.
No.
Some people aren't like that.
But so you see her after she achieved the result?
Yes, I mean, I might see some. Yeah, absolutely. So
the session doesn't end, or
no, hers doesn't.
Okay.
Even if I don't, so if I just booked to coach someone, for instance, for an event, I'll always ring them afterwards. So I'll always talk to someone post-coaching, whether we've got another face-to-face meeting or not. I'll always talk to someone and stay in touch and find out how it's going and what they're doing and what they find useful.
Right.
Always, yeah.
And have you told them that up front, that you're gonna follow up like that, or is?
Oh yes.
So so they know that you're gonna call.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. No, they know. We've typically formed a good relationship, and they know I'm interested.
Yeah.
In their success, and sometimes they send me email. Sometimes they pick up the phone to me. Sometimes I phone them. So last week I had an email from someone I'd coached a couple of weeks before, and she just dropped me an email to say that what she was doing with it, and she's a manager of a customer service team, and so she just dropped me an email to say what she'd done with all the coaching and what they'd achieved and how they'd moved forwards, and this is what she was going to do next and where she'd like some more help.
Yeah. Okay. And you said you mentioned 70 minutes. So how long is a normal session when you?
That depends as well. Okay. Sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's 2 hours, sometimes it's a whole day.
Oh, a whole day with is that with a group or a person?
No, sometimes on the personal impact coaching that I do, it can sometimes be about 6 hours.
One person?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Just because we do a lot of video, we do a lot of feedback. So if they've got a big event, I will help them design a presentation, I'll help them practice it, we'll video it, we'll do feedback, we'll do it again, we'll do more feedback. So sometimes it's longer than 6 hours, sometimes it's 8 or 9 hours.
All right.
But so those are really intensive days.
Yeah, it must be.
But it's good, it's great.
And the clients, how do they feel about 6-7 hours?
Hopefully they like it, they come back for more.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it is intensive, but if we've only got a day to help them, they don't want to do 2 hours every month for 6 months. That's not, they've come for some intense work for something that they need to achieve the following week.
Right.
We can do loads of work together in 6 hours. We can write it, we can design it, we can practice it.
Right.
And then by the end of that time, they're really confident and they're really ready to go. So it's great coaching, it's lovely.
Right.
Yeah.
There are a few questions that I jumped to, I skipped before. There was questions about what do you do to ensure that your coaching is effective?
It's a big question. What do you do to lots of things. Talk to the client who's asked, often I'm asked to go in by someone else, so talk to them in depth and gather feedback beforehand about what we're talking about, what the behaviour is. Talk to the client that I'm working with in depth and make sure that I've understood the situation and that I'm the right person and the tools and techniques appear at that time to be appropriate. And sometimes, things change in the client's situation, so you can't always ensure it's going to be effective, but you can judge a situation, use the right tools, work with the client in the right way. That's all that I would do, which is follow up, follow through, and make sure there's kind of rigour to it, really.
What kind of rigour?
Rigour in terms of that I'm using the right tools, or creating the right atmosphere, or that I'm the right person to deal with them.
Right. And how do you find out?
I think instinct. I've only a couple of times thought I wasn't the right person.
Right.
And once a client has said that they would rather work with a man than a woman, so that's fine.
Right.
Sorry, there's something else about that. Make it effective. Is occasionally it's also measured. So with sales performance coaching, the effect of the coaching is actually measured.
Right.
So that's actually quite strict, if you like.
Yeah.
So the effect of the coaching, there are benchmarks in place.
Yeah.
So sometimes there are very strict benchmarks in place for it.
Right. And do you use other benchmarks in other situations?
With coaching, no, I don't think so. Yes, actually I do, thinking about it. Leadership coaching, for instance, if they've done a 360 before and then we've done coaching, then there'll be a form of assessment or a repeat of the 360 more commonly at the end.
Right, to see if they have progress.
Yeah.
Right. And do you do anything particular to establish credibility as a coach or for positive psychology? Or?
Positive psychology, it's easier because there's not that many people in the field, and I was one of the first in Europe to go through it, and I lecture on it, and I've got the book coming out with it, and I work with the schools. I've got the book coming out this year, so positive psychology feels a bit easier to do credibility with. In general, it's purely on recommendation.
Right.
So credibility is there through the recommendation.
Right. And what about how do you establish and maintain a good working alliance with your clients?
Normal good working practice in terms of doing what I say I'm going to do, following through on it, where possible going above and beyond what's being asked. So yeah, we haven't lost a client in 11 years, so I think we're doing it right.
Right. And do you do anything in particular in the sessions when you sit with the client to establish a good working alliance?
Yes, I'm sure that I do. Exactly what I do, I'm not sure, but I ask a lot of questions at the start, and I share back as much as they share with me at the start, so that we're not in a therapeutic relationship. So I'm happy to share back when I've felt the same, or situations I face that might have been similar. So I do my best to make them feel both at ease with me and that I'm someone they could work with. But exactly how I do that, I would need someone to observe me and tell me that.
Right. But you share your own experiences, self-disclosure?
Yes,
kind of thing?
yeah, will do. Yeah, very much so.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that put in the beginning or also in sessions?
In sessions, depending. You know, I know what it's like to present, I know what it's like to feel nervous, I know what it's like to sell, I know what it's like to be underperform, overperform. I know what it's like to lead a company. You know, I've been in some very similar situations as the people I'm coaching.
Yeah.
I know what it's like to feel stressed or feel down, or I've been in some similar situations, and I'm happy to disclose where it feels appropriate.
Right. And how do you make sure that clients in between sessions progress towards their goals?
Because we set what we expect in between each coaching session. So all the people I work with have set their own goals of what we want to do to measure progress through the coaching.
So what could be an example?
Again, it depends on who I'm working with, but for instance, I've got a group of managers who I'm training up at the moment as coaches, and I'm coaching them to coach. So for instance, they might have written a coaching plan, they might have conducted two coaching sessions, they might have written feedback on those, they might have written a reflective log on coaching they've conducted and how successful that's been or not. So there are a number of different exercises. Another client I'm working with on strengths and confidence at the moment and personal impact. The last time we met, she had completed the strengths deployment inventory, and then she went away to share that with her working colleagues to gain feedback from them on her behaviour and to have discussions about how she can improve her behaviour to forge a better working relationship, and she brought those back to our last session.
Right. So it's homework assignments, or?
I don't see it as that, but it is certainly reflecting on the coaching and always doing something with it.
Right. So how do you see it if it's not?
Yeah, maybe it's just the term of homework that maybe it's the term language of homework or assignment I react against, but it is.
Right.
It is doing that. So it is working on it, reflecting on it, and doing something with it. And
how do you follow up in the next session when they come back and say, I've done it, or I haven't done it, or I've only done part of it, or?
It's up. They're adults. I can't go and make them do it. If they haven't done it, then it either wasn't the right time, or something happened, or it was the wrong exercise. So I trust that implicitly that they want to do the coaching and that they will put it into place. So we'll work it out together. What's the right next step?
Right. And do you do other things to make sure that they progress towards their goals?
No, other than sending memory joggers or emails to them.
What's a memory jogger?
Or I might drop them an email or something and ask them how they're getting on with it, or I might send them something. So I might send them a strengths card, for instance, with a postcard, and jog their memories on something that we've discussed.
Right.
Or I might send them, I have little postcards that I send, and so I write notes to some of my clients. And
so you have a postcard, you write something and you send it?
Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't heard about that before. I've heard people writing to themselves, and then the teacher sends it after half a year, and then they have written a letter to them.
Oh, I do that quite a lot. So after, yes, I forgot that. So after, that's more at training, what I will very commonly do is people write what they want to learn from it, and then I send it to them at various intervals.
Yeah.
So I do that quite a lot.
Right. I haven't heard the other one.
Yeah, where I send little notes, just job memory.
Yeah. What do you think makes it work when they actually achieve their goals? What could be the mechanisms within, if it's positive psychology coaching?
I think lots of things make it work, or not. Sometimes something's happened within the business environment that has shaken them. So I don't think that the coaching has always been effective. Maybe I actually didn't answer that correctly. In that sometimes you find that the company's suddenly been sold, or something's happened within the work environment, so that interrupts the process hugely.
Yeah.
But when it's been effective, why do I think it is? I think it's several things. I think either the tool was absolutely right for them, and it triggered something in their mind that was just right, or the relationship with me gave them confidence in itself. So I know that within coaching, often people just want to, the relationship is the most important thing often. Or they commonly have seen progress and received feedback that's been positive and reinforced the move that they're trying to make, and that's been great. And then the minute they're seeing benefit from it, then I tend to see quite rapid improvement.
Right. Other things that
that make it effective?
Yeah.
I don't know, tapping into the different learning senses, definitely.
Say something more.
So, as I talked about earlier, I tend to use visual tools, kinesthetic tools, not just discussion, and that often works.
Yeah.
I think the environment has a huge effect on it. Getting them out of the environment. I often coach in London at a place called 1 Alfred Place, and that often works really well.
Right.
I can't think of other things.
Mm-hmm. And what do you do yourself to stay updated on what happens within positive psychology?
Well, I have a good link. I have a very strong link with UEL, so I hear about what's going on, certainly with all the recent graduates and what they're doing, and we're starting to form a good kind of European link. And then I just read lots on it, so whatever's coming out, I read lots about it, so I'm endlessly curious about it, so I'll do what I can to stay updated on it.
So read books or articles or...
All of it, books, articles,
internet,
magazines, internet, whatever happens to be coming out on it, I'll tend to kind of have a read of it. And because I also run a positive psychology blog, I write a positive psychology blog, I stay updated myself in order to make sure I'm updating others.
Right,
so that helps. So one of the reasons actually I started the blog was to make sure that I was staying updated myself, because I figured that would make me stay updated if I was having to write it for others. Yeah. And
other ways that you stay updated or develop professionally?
Certainly in terms of positive psychology, that's I also have a positive psychology group. All the coaches that I used for my dissertation, we stay in touch and we have a positive psychology group, so we discuss how we're using it, how we're moving it forwards, and then they give me feedback in terms of what they're doing. That's probably all the ways.
Right. And when you learn something new, how do you integrate it with what you already do?
I turn it into an exercise. So if I like it and I think it's interesting and I think it's useful for clients, then I create an exercise out of it and try it out.
And who do you try it out on?
When I'm training, coaching, I I might even say, you might like this, might not, let's try it, I want to have a look at it, I'd love you to have a look at it.
Yeah.
So yes, I'll always turn it into something so that we can see whether it's got legs or not.
Right. And just to make sure I understand it correctly, so you have a way of working, and then you create another tool, an exercise, I think of that as a tool.
Yes.
That you could put into what you already...
Yes.
So it doesn't change your approach,
no.
It just adds to it.
No, positive psychology hasn't particularly changed my approach at all. I am more mindful of the language I use, and I'm much more mindful of the questions that I ask. And in terms of looking at the best of what is and how to get more of it. But to me, it's just added to a toolkit that was already there.
Right. Okay. What would you say makes positive psychology coaching different from other types of coaching, or other ways that you could have been
I'm not
working?
sure that it is. I think it's very close cousins with NLP coaching, appreciative inquiry, solutions focused. I'm not sure. I don't even think, by the way, that there is a field, positive psychology coaching. I think it is another way of looking at coaching, and I don't actually think that the interventions within positive psychology are that strong, particularly for a British audience. I don't think they're that strong. I think there's much better things out there, like Myers-Briggs, things like that, for coaching. Where I think it's useful is I think that it's validated a lot of what I do with some science.
Right.
And I think it's made me more mindful of looking at strengths and taking that strengths-based approach.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I answered your question though.
Well, I can rephrase it. So a person doing the MAP degree here, and either coaching or learning how to coach also, how would that person differ from someone who only did a coaching degree or had a different background?
They would be informed in a different way. So if they can apply the learning from the MAP degree across to coaching, then they're going to be informed in a broader way about what makes someone successful. So yeah, I mean, they're going to understand more about what happiness, what well-being, what flourishing actually looks like genuinely. So it could influence the way you coach hugely, but I think that with positive psychology you've got to work hard to find the applications. It's not there, it's not set out, it's not like NLP sets out the way the NLP coach and the tools and the applications and the questions and the way to do it. Positive psychology is still an academic subject.
Yeah.
And how to apply it to coaching is still anyone's guess.
Right.
So a lot of the students coming out of MAP don't know how to apply it across to coaching. There's nothing to say how to do that. However, if you are a coach and you have positive psychology, then it strengthens your learning, your understanding of human beings and what it takes to flourish.
Yeah. Makes sense. And the book that you're writing, you mentioned earlier that you're writing a book. So where does that... Is that about this subject, how to apply it, or what was
that's for not teenagers, 11 to 15-year-olds. So we wrote, Alona Bonniwell and I wrote all the curriculums for Haberdasher Ask and the Newham Resilience Programme. So we wrote a whole resilience programme for the 5 schools in the East End of London for Newham County Council, and they trialled it. And the book is a well-being curriculum for 11 to 15-year-olds.
Oh, I thought it was positive psychology coaching.
Well, it's not positive psychology and coaching, it's a well-being curriculum.
Right.
Yeah, so it's resilience.
Yeah. And are there any things that we have not talked about in the way that you work that are important to understand how you go about it?
No, only in that I'm not sure that I've talked about in terms of how it's influenced a lot, and how I train people out to ask better questions and ask strength-based coaching questions. I don't think we've talked about that.
Can you say something more?
Well, I think what happens a lot in coaching is that people focus on what's the problem. What problem have you brought to me? What's the issue? And the whole coaching discussion can often revolve around what's the problem. I'm really interested in the learning from appreciative inquiry about exploring the problem, but actually helping people understand what they're like at their best and how they can operate at that level more of the time. And I think that has had a profound impact on what I do and how I work with people, is taking that broader strengths-based approach and just asking better, different questions in terms of what has gone well. So at the start of every coaching session, I would always find out what's actually gone well for someone and what's actually been effective about what we've done and where they have progressed.
Huh.
I think people naturally want to talk about what they haven't done well.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've talked at all about... I think there's an assumption here that people want positive psychology coaching, and I don't think they do. In that, I think people are quite resistant to positive approaches. I think people naturally want to talk about what's wrong, what's not working, what's not good about them. Given a list of a psychometric, they'll look at the bottom ones, and they're much more comfortable there. So some people don't want to look at what's right, what's strong, what you're like at your best. Yet it's really useful to get people at some point to that position.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's it.
Are there other things that we've not talked about that are important to the way that you work?
I don't think so. I don't know. I wouldn't
know. What would you like to know about other people doing positive psychology and coaching? If I could ask other people, what would you like to know from them?
I'd love to know how they're using it. I'd love to know how they're doing. People who've learnt about it, what they're doing. I think it would be fascinating.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people using positive psychology who haven't gone through the rigour of a master's.
Yeah.
And are labelling themselves as positive psychology coaches, and I'd love to know what they're doing, how they're using it, how they're integrating it. So yes, I'd like to know how people have done what I've tried to do, which is take the academics of it and turn it into something useful.
Yeah.
And particularly in a business context.
Yeah. Other things?
Yeah, I'd just like to know how people have found it, and I'd like to know what clients think of it.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure people will have, applied it in so many ways, particularly, at work. And I think I'm quite shy of introducing happiness in a business context.
Yeah.
But I know, for instance, in Denmark, people aren't shy about introducing it at all. And I'd like to learn from that.
Yeah.
I probably could be a lot bolder.
There's a word called working happiness or working joy in Danish. So it's a normal word, and therefore it's sometimes easy to
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
So it's not really the happiness word, it's more like joy.
Yeah,
word, but
it's about work and joy.
Yeah.
I don't think we have that in Britain.
Okay. Because of a word that already exists and is being used, then it's very easy to just use that.
Right.
So maybe that's the reason why.
Yeah,
it's
that's
easy
really
to
interesting.
introduce. So.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to other people who would start to work in this area?
I think it can integrate beautifully with other forms of coaching. What I would probably say is it's worth learning it properly.
Right.
In that it has a lot of depth and a lot of science. I get concerned when positive psychology is just equated with the gratitude journal or count your blessings, when it has so much to offer. So I would really like a proper field in it so that people learn to do it well.
Yeah.
That would be great. But I would advise anyone to have a go with it. It's not going to go wrong particularly. There's nothing limiting about it.
Mm-hmm.
Clients I work with love it. They find it fascinating.
Yeah.
Because it's about being a human being.
Yeah.
So, I think people would really enjoy it.
Yeah. Are there things that you could give as advice?
No, I don't know. I think it is easier to integrate if you are already a coach, and I would urge someone to just develop their toolkit rather than just be a positive psychology coach.
Yeah.
But no, I'll learn from others rather than giving out advice.
Right.